It's a pleasure to be back. I'm from London, so any excuse to get back here is a real pleasure. My name's Dion Almaer.
I'm Ben. It's great to be here. And you know, to be honest with you, it's a great time to be a developer. It's not too long ago that if you were doing UI development on...
Gorgeous. The swing set.
Yeah, this is like state of the art, right? Not too long ago. And are we a little tinted, by the way? Is there? Looks like we're a little pink on the slides. I don't know if we can fix that. And if you were doing, true native development, this is what you'd be sort of banished to, MFC development.
And then on the web, beautiful stuff.
Well, that was the standout, right? Websites were just gorgeous.
Gorgeous.
Gorgeous,
Apple branded, beautiful, known for their design.
And mobile. I mean, this
was... Oh, man.
This was fantastic,
320 right? By, what was it? Yeah.
Oh, I don't even remember, right? By 2 bits or whatever like that. And now we've got amazing mobile devices that some people frankly worship. The browser, it's amazing what you can do in a browser, right?
Yeah, have you seen the car visualization? This came out about a week or so ago. WebGL rendering of the car, just absolutely gorgeous. Performs really well, and just running natively right in the browser.
Or the Google Body browser. I mean, to think that you can do this in a browser today is really pretty fantastic. And stepping beyond the technology, there's also the opportunity to get rich, right? I mean, there are a number of billionaires who got rich just by programming. I mean, some of these guys never even pivoted to be CEOs, right?
Yeah, totally. Like the global financial crisis is happening all around the world, but we, the programmers, we're going in there. We're the billionaires.
And then there's the hangers-on. And then there's this guy. This is noted former Microsoft CTO Nathan Myhrvold, food scientist pioneer, and I guess he's also the world's largest patent troll, isn't he? So I guess that's kind of a bummer, really, right?
Yeah, what's going on with the patents thing? Well, whatever. Right now, things are great.
Who would have thought that a Microsoft guy would come back and screw the community? I'm kidding. So it's really sort of a tale of two cities for us right now, right? It's the best of times. It's never been better, right? The technologies we have, the devices we have, the finances of our industry, it's all fantastic, but the patent stuff could really destroy everything. But we're sort of in this era of decadence in technology. And as we go back and look at the great ages, there's always been these sort of dilemmas, these sort of niggling things that have been in the background in these ages. Like in the 20s, it was Paris versus New York, right?
Or London too.
Yeah, okay. And also, novel or a short story, like these really sort of, fundamental concerns. And then there's the 80s, the other great era, right?
VHS or Betamax.
That's right, or Coke or...
heroin.
I was going for Pepsi, but yeah.
Speed.
Because we're velocity. That's our speed. Yeah, we'll save that one for next year. And for us in our community, we think there's also this sort of big concern right now that we're all wondering, and that's whether if we're going to create an experience with the web or app. And in fact, as we were sort of putting the finishing touches on the slides, just some polish, mind you, last night, we saw this tweet in our Twitter stream. It sort of summarizes the angst or the questioning that's out there about what people should do. And so as we talk to you about this question, if you look at our background, you might kind of think that we're web guys. We started Ajaxian, Dion spent some time at Google, we were at Mozilla together, we were trying to make WebOS successful. We're really great at that, as you'll notice. And so you'd expect that our horse would be on the web, right? And in fact, we really love the web. To us, the web is sort of like democracy in technology. It's the platform that we control, that we influence. There's no single vendor that tells us how it is. But at the same time, these are pictures of real democracies. Sometimes it's not so pretty.
Yeah, one of these is from a W3C meeting.
I think it's that one sort of at the end with the girl on the desk. Like, these are real democracies. And so you look at the messiness, and you kind of think, well, maybe other forms look pretty good. I mean, maybe we ought to just have one leader that tells us how it is.
Yeah, and by the way, just to make sure, we made sure the princess was fully clothed
of the things. Yeah, we're all taken care of there. No lawsuits for O'Reilly, we're set. But the downside of this model, of course, is when it goes wrong.
Ooh. And you got a certain dictator, well, maybe he's okay, but the big problem is always the sun. What happens next?
And so you look at the downside of despotism, and all of a sudden democracy looks pretty good, right? You kind of take a second look at it, well, maybe there's some beauty there we didn't see before. So we really want the web to win, but we're also pragmatists. Has anyone seen the bridge over the River Kwai? Anyone see this? I think that's a few hands. Very nice, very nice. So, of course, what happens in this movie is you got this group of British engineers who are captured by the enemy, and they're forced to build this bridge. And so being British, they want to do it right. Do it right, right. What? And so they build this bridge, and a group of allies comes in to blow up the bridge, because ultimately it's for the enemy. And the British guys actually try to stop the Allies until all of a sudden they reach this point where they realize, oh, we've forgotten the big picture. We've lost sight of what we're all about and sort of gotten distracted. And so even though we're web guys, we feel like the big picture is delivering the best possible experiences we can for our users. And if we can't do that with web technologies, then we don't. And so if you look at what we've done with our mobile strategy at Walmart, we have a fantastic mobile website that we're really proud of, but we've also done some work with native apps. And we'll talk about our view on that and why we've done that. There's also another thing we want to talk about before we get started in the talk, and that's mobile. So we spend all of our time talking about mobile, and we think that it sort of reflects where the world's going. Because if you look at what happened with the iPhone, there's the obvious thing. It liberated us from things like the experience on the other side of the iPhone. It sort of took mobile from the gutter and made it into this beautiful experience, but it also did something else too.
Yeah, on the other side, it also brought a great consumer-grade operating system. And a lot of us have seen this watching younger folks and older folks. My mum now uses technology using the iPad in a way where she's not scared to go in there and Word, and suddenly she gets viruses and everything turns into Spanish and the like. The kids just come along, they instantly know what they're doing.
It's the world's first consumer-grade operating system. And that's in the process of pivoting to the desktop. Apple's made no secret of their intention to bring that to the desktop more and more, and I think over the next 3 or 4 years we'll see full convergence. And that's also why HP bought Palm. They understood what it meant to have a consumer-grade operating system, and they really wanted that. And this is the quote, the famous quote from Mark Hurd when he said this. We were at Palm at the time, and Palm just exploded, right? Like, no, it is about. And so HP went back and edited this quote to say, we didn't buy Palm just to be in the smartphone business. But I think Mark had it right the first time. Mobile really wasn't their intent. They really saw the potential. And then, of course, there's mobile first, this phrase that we all hear. The first real big instance of it that I found was from Eric Schmidt at Mobile World Congress back in February 2010. The world's really focused on mobile. We're converging on mobile, and so that's why our focus is on mobile. So having said that, let's get into it. As people look at mobile strategy, I think this quote from our former boss, John Rubinstein, sort of says it. This sort of sense that we get from people that the web is the inevitable winner, right? It's going to happen no matter what. But if you break into some of the arguments, we're really sort of puzzled by this view. Scott Jensen has this view that native apps just need to die. And if you sort of analyze his argument, and this is an argument captured by a few different people, it's that having all these apps, having to install them and things like that is just kind of a mess, and really you ought to just use the web. But then we look at the web and we kind of look at our bookmarks, and it actually seems like the app model makes more sense. I mean, like pictures of the apps and being able to easily organize them actually works a lot better than my bookmarks on mobile. Kind of seems like this argument doesn't make a lot of sense.
And then you have people in the business community. I'm not sure if you're seeing this as much as maybe where we live in Palo Alto. The VCs are walking around just saying, I want to get me more of that HTML5. No idea what it is. And that's kind of shown here by, there's this well-known VC from Elevation Partners, Roger McNamee, and he wrote this piece on how HTML5 is going to be this big new thing. Try and understand it, because we have no idea what he's talking about. But we're seeing that time
Send us a note.
again.
Tell us what he said. And then there's also the analyst that, this is always funny because a lot of us in IT sort of don't know what's happening in the future, so we just grab the Gartner quotes, throw them in presentations, and assume that they actually have a crystal ball. And in fact, they're wrong as often as they're right, if not more so. And then there's the fact that a lot of inevitabilities don't actually come to pass. And I think if any audience understands that, it's this one. I mean, sometimes the trends don't betray the realities. And in fact, if you sort of dig into this idea that the web is just going to win, so the apps are just sort of a short-term distraction that we should just get over, you realize it comes from our past in the microcomputer space. We got a picture of the ZX Spectrum on there, by the way.
Finally, an audience that will know the ZX Spectrum and the rubber keyboard. Yeah.
Thank you for that. But when the microcomputer revolution happened, we had all these different platforms, all this diversity. But eventually it went away, somewhat like we've seen with mobile. One player ran away on the back of an app advantage, the Microsoft ecosystem. And even though other people tried to come into that ecosystem and innovate, they were shut off by the monopoly that was in place. And what we love is that so often when these players achieve that monopoly position, when consumers give them this massive share, what do they tend to do? They tend to sort of give back to the community that got them there.
They reward the people with
quality
fantastic
quality product every time. And of course, there was this sort of hegemony of Microsoft that led to really crappy products. And what sort of broke that?
Right. So we already went through this once with the app system, and the thing that broke it was the web. The web came along and kind of gave us this VM, a cross-platform way to kind of give us access to these really amazing things. And back then, we were all focused on the office of the world and productivity and all of that kind of good stuff. But now suddenly okay, that's fun, but that's for the workplace. Now we want to experience all of these amazing things that we can get through the internet. All of the brands that we're used to, the Googles, the YouTubes, everything else that's out there. Now that's what mattered. It wasn't all about productivity. It was about this amazing internet and how you could get access through the web browser.
And in fact, you kind of see that Microsoft's trying to replay this with IE9 on the desktop. When they did this event, I guess it's been a few years now, when IE9 came out, they talked a lot about how, hey, this is the internet, it's all about the internet is awesome on IE9 and we're the best platform for it. Reminded us a lot of Steve Jobs' strategy when he came back to Apple. His strategy wasn't, hey, the Mac is the best operating system for apps, it was the Mac is the best way to get to the web. So people are trying to replay this strategy right now and say that the web is really what matters, and so it doesn't matter if you have all the apps in the world like some of the players do, all you need is the web. But if you sort of dig into this a little bit more and ask yourself, well, why did the web play this role? Why did the web sort of catch on and allow us to break out of the Microsoft monopoly? You sort of realize that the world was a lot different back then, right?
Yeah, so let's step back in time a little bit. Getting software onto your system, what would you have to do? You'd walk to a store. Imagine my mom going to a store to get some software, meeting this lovely gentleman and asking for the shrink wrap. So, excuse me, sir, can I get this? This is the world that we're in when we're actually getting the software. And even before that, for the Spectrum days, I remember going into the store to get like the sheets of BASIC to go back and program on. Kind of a miserable experience discovering software back then.
And then the installation process, do you remember this? Like the disks or the CD-ROMs?
Insert disk 13.
That was fairly unpleasant. And then once you installed it all, you got rewarded with just an amazing experience, right? It was like a beautiful application that was immersive. So, you go back and you look at it, and electronic distribution back then, there was a clear advantage for the web. Nowadays, we kind of argue back and forth over it. Like for the web, yeah, you can go to an experience that you haven't installed on your app, but isn't it so much better to actually find it and discover it through the App Store and install it on your device? It sort of seems like there's a win there on the distribution, and that dovetails with ease of installation. It's not really clear that the web is such a winner here. And then when you get to the quality of experience, whereas before it was kind of par, the desktop apps weren't really all that great, so it didn't matter that the web wasn't all that great. Now the apps are, they're kind of amazing. It's really incredible what you can do. And so it's really unclear that these same factors that caused the web to win are in place for the web to win now. And then you've got this factor, right?
Right, so you got the most popular OSs right now. Surely they're going to make sure that the web is just a phenomenal platform. Well, maybe they're actually disincented to make that happen. Maybe they want to make the browser fantastic, but not be able to do exactly what you can do and go as far on the native side. And this isn't just about Apple. I think you could argue this about the Android team as well. It's like they want to get lock-in for their apps. They want to deliver a special experience for their customers. They don't want cross-platform to win. So
as we look at it, we feel like there's a really good question here about web versus apps. It's not a matter of inevitabilities. It's not, as Gartner says, a fait accompli. We just need to wait and apps will sort of go away and HTML5 will win. There's a real question about whether we should invest in webs or apps. And for us, you sort of need to break it down a little bit. And you realize there's two questions here. Should we use the web as our delivery platform for experiences? Should the web be the way that we connect with our customers? Or should we use the web as the experience platform? And what we mean by this is this trend that we've seen over the past few years to pretend that the web stack is actually an app stack and use it to create app experiences that are distributed through the app channels. But the web is essentially this cross-platform GUI toolkit, much like Swing was in the Java days and Smalltalk was before that and things. So let's sort of dive into this for a few minutes. Let's talk about the web as a delivery platform. And for a lot of us, the web has been the reach platform for a very long time. The web is the way you connect with massive audience, and all of the other proprietary technologies are sort of for segmented audiences. But as we've looked at the data, we've seen some interesting trends. This is one that we've seen for a while now. I think this is over a year and a half ago. It was clear that if you look at the lines here, the red line indicates the size of app audiences, and the green line is the size of worldwide internet audiences. And for quite some time now, we've seen that app audiences are actually much larger than internet audiences. And here's another way to look at it. This one's from 9 months ago. The amount of time that the average consumer spends engaged with apps is actually larger than the amount of time that they spend engaged with the internet. So this notion that the internet was the reach platform and the way that you engage with people is slipping away. And then you look at some specific case studies and you start to realize just sort of the size and reach of the app platforms that are out there. One great example is Angry Birds. So Angry Birds, in 2 years, has become the largest gaming franchise in history, has overcome Mario Brothers, which sort of blows my mind, right? All the incarnations of Mario Brothers and all of its different platforms, 2 years, Angry Birds on mobile blows it away. And then you got Draw Something.
Yeah, then you get to see the next size of the extremity, and you could also argue that maybe we come up really quickly and we come crashing down really quickly too, but it's kind of amazing when you look at the scale, at how fast that little application kind of got out to the huge number of users compared to very large brands, and how long it took that.
I think that may start to explain why some startups are increasingly just saying, you know what, we don't actually even need a web engagement point. Flipboard's an example. Path is another example. They don't even bother having a web interface at all. They have like one landing page that you can get to so you can tweet links and so on, but their experience is ignored on the web. And so you sort of start to come to this viewpoint as we have that the web is the reach platform, but it's reach in the sense that if you want to get to devices that people are increasingly not caring about, it's the platform you use. But otherwise, if you want to get to massive mainstream audiences, you use the app platform.
But then you start to think about what it actually takes to kind of deliver these experiences across all of these different platforms. And it's kind of like, really? Am I really going to have to go through this massive pain to get across to these different app ecosystems?
And for us, we look at it as we've got a mobile website that we do, an iOS app, an Android app, and then Android tablets, and then the iPad, and then tablet optimized websites, and then if Windows Phone gets share, we got to support that. And then in our situation, we have to do that across geographies, and so we've got all these different countries that we support, and it starts to feel like developing the experiences that we do feels like you're sort of solving a Rubik's Cube, right? Except it sort of feels like an extra big, extra challenging Rubik's Cube. And then it's the fact that it doesn't actually feel right. It's like, imagine this world where, let's say you've got great content, like a TV show Friends, that's just enormously popular and successful and in television. And let's say that you want to bring it to a different distribution channel, for example, DVD. The analog for us is that you'd have to, in this case, recache the show and reshoot it. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. And then if you want to target kind of a smaller, different distribution channel like, I don't know, Sony Minidisc, then you can't afford a really high quality cast because it's not a big audience. So you got to recast it with sort of the app.
Find your friends.
This is sort of what we do in mobile, and it doesn't seem like it makes sense. And so that sort of explains why there's this temptation to sort of take a mobile website that you may have and just sort of, kind of cheat, right? And say, it's an app, right?
There's tabs on the bottom.
You got a tab bar at the bottom. It's an app experience. And it's sort of worth diving into this part of the talk about whether or not the web can be a technology platform that we can use to solve this problem, this cross-platform pain that we have. And it's sort of characterized by PhoneGap and the popularity of PhoneGap and other solutions that lets you do this, that lets you take a web app and distribute it as a native app. But there are a couple problems with that. I mean, one problem is that the native toolkits are really sophisticated. I mean, the quality of the components, the visual widgets in iOS is really astonishing about how scalable they are to deal with large data sets, just the attention to detail and the beauty, hardware accelerated backing. I mean, it sort of blows your mind what you can do with these things.
You compare the components to like the forms that we have on the web, even with HTML5. And then you've all been this, when you want to get this great, beautiful experience on your mobile device, it's kind of like when you go see a movie, you want to see De Niro. You want to see the real De Niro. You don't want to see this guy pretending to be De Niro. That's what we get on some of these experiences that are using web to kind of sneak it onto the platform. It doesn't really look right, it doesn't really feel right. And we're seeing a ton of examples of this, especially as the mobile world matures natively and people migrate back to the web. Here's an example of Disney, and they've done something that's visually attractive, and it's a good implementation, but the 3 bars kind of menu UI that we started to see in Path and now Facebook and all these apps on the iOS platform give us, you play with those, you can move them around smoothly, it just feels great, it animates nicely. You go to the web version, you try and touch that thing and boom, that's it. You just got this like toggle to go backwards and forwards. It doesn't feel like what you're getting used to as a consumer as you use actually the native components. And there's just tons of examples.
And then if you look at, this is a Twitter stream that we saw as we were preparing this talk a little while ago, where Arl Balkan talks about how, it just feels wrong, right? It feels wrong to take the web and drop it into native, and you feel that way, sort of like how in the early days of the web, Adobe was telling people that they should take PDFs and call those websites. I don't know if you remember that. There was actually a movement to do that. Maybe that doesn't work for Arl, but maybe your user base doesn't care, right? I mean, maybe...
Yeah, maybe we're pedants that we're all in the technology, we really see the differences, we know what's going on. But maybe actually it doesn't matter.
Yeah, a lot of our users doesn't care. And if your user base does care, all you have to do is target the enterprise, right? And your users don't have a choice, and you can capture them that way. But if the web doesn't work for you to copy UIs, another approach is you can just create these immersive user interfaces that sort of break away from this game of trying to pretend like you're De Niro and actually try to create this whole new world that doesn't try to look and feel like native. And that approach might actually work in mobile if it weren't for the fact that Android is there. Because my friends, Android is truly the stopper here for using web as a technology platform for delivering experiences, because Android, its web browser and its SDK sucks so badly.
Yeah, we deliver all of these experiences all around the world, and we'll get all of these reports about a particular version of Android by a particular vendor that if you dynamically add some JavaScript to the web view or the web page, it just crashes the entire thing. Everything just blows up. And that'll be a reasonable percentage of our user base. And we just see this kind of day in and day out, just bugs due to the nature of the fragmentation of what's going on. It's incredibly painful, and you spend a lot of time working around these bugs, if you're lucky, to deliver a half-decent user experience. So this leverage of just writing it once, it just kind of works everywhere, turns out to be the typical write once, debug everywhere.
And it's, the fragmentation is enormous. And Chrome is finally on Android, which is fantastic, but it's not a developer story. There's no embeddable Chrome component for developers. So it really is irrelevant to this idea of using the web as this experience platform. So that doesn't really work in our experience. So do you just do native? Do you actually have to do native and the web? Well, you kind of have to do web, because the web is the way that you capture audience from Google and mobile. And Google is still the biggest driver of traffic around, even on mobile. And you're sort of insane if you think that you can just have some sort of a placeholder link that people will click on in Google search results that says, hey, stop what you're doing and download an app. Well, that's not going to work, so you have to have a mobile website. And as we mentioned, if you want to target these devices, you pretty much have to have a mobile website too, because it probably doesn't make sense to create an app for audiences that are this small these days. So you look at this and you think, gee whiz, this kind of sucks. We got to do web and apps. And you might want to try and just sort of, despite the fact that we've said that web doesn't work to get leverage, to try it. And in fact, for a long time, we've been fans of a sort of hybrid approach where you have a native application and you use the web for part of it. And LinkedIn was a great example of this, where they had a fantastic native application, but they also used the web heavily. We would talk about that. We talk about how Facebook used to have this hybrid architecture where they would share the news stream and all these different platforms. And we went ahead and implemented it.
Yeah, so on our side, we got these different experiences that Ben has talked about, native ones and the website. But then we wanted to kind of share some functionality between it. And the area that we really cared about is the checkout flow. That's an area that you want to do a ton of A/B testing. You want to make sure there's no issues, that a bug in the native app kills you on the checkout flow. So we wanted to build the same experience and kind of deliver it across these three different worlds.
So if you look at our apps, just quickly run through this, we have a native card on the left, and on the right is actually web embedded. And it's largely successful. We had the same code base, and we were able to skin it using CSS for different platforms. We added some JavaScript to that engine so that on the iPad, even though we've got a native cart here and checkout, this is all web. Again, same code base with some JavaScript magic to relay out the components. And we did get some leverage. It appeared for a while, but then it's really started to go a little backwards on us, because the Android team would always just sort of come to us with these sort of random glitches that were really hard to predict, but were really causing the team a lot of time. And then when the native teams wanted to make a new release, they also had to coordinate with the web teams and work out dependencies. And so it got to the point where we actually felt like we got negative leverage out of the experience. We didn't actually win anything out of it. And around the same time, the same companies that were promoting this experience, that were promoting the web as an experience platform for mobile, backed away from it really quickly. Google, which you'd argue has the biggest incentive of any iOS developer to move towards web technologies, prominently abandoned that strategy. And now most of their top banner experiences are full native applications on iOS, and they brag about that outcome. And we also saw that Facebook did something similar, releasing first the camera app, which was a good sign of what was happening, this beautiful native iOS app. And then, of course, there's the TechCrunch moment that I'm sure you've all heard a lot about, where Zuck came out and said a couple of choice quotes like, it's our biggest mistake on mobile that we did HTML5, and that the move to native gave them a 2x increase in speed, but also a 2x increase in engagement.
And this is pretty amazing because we got to see what it would be like to take the same app and just kind of port it over. The functionality isn't that different. There's a few things with photos and this and the other, but basically the UI is the same. And just being able to see that level of engagement, like in our world in e-commerce, trying to tweak the conversion is just a massive deal. And to be able to get a 2x on both the speed side and on the engagement side is pretty remarkable.
It's amazing. Why is it so much more effective? Well, one of the advantages is that as we create richer experiences in the web, the amount of data that we have to push down to these mobile clients increases and increases, and there's really no sort of a law of physics problem, right? There's no way to avoid that. The richer that your client experience goes, the more the upfront delay is, and the more people have to wait. Whereas apps, it's all preloaded. It's all right there on the device. It's super, super fast. And that's one of the advantages that native has over this stuff. And what's interesting to us is if you come back and look at Facebook, though, it's not actually all about, it's not actually fully native, right?
Yeah, I think this is really a key point, is the nuance side of things. And this is something that we've been looking to leverage as well. So the great advantage of the hybrid approach that we had is the way that we could tweak the checkout, A/B test, do all of these great things. And for us to be able to do that was really, really important. For Facebook, they've got this news feed, and they've got different kinds of content happening all the time. They're doing deployments 30 times a day or whatever they're doing. And to give that up to a native platform is just too painful. And so they've done something which I think is really smart, which is you experiment on the web and use web views if a particular type of content comes along, but you then codify it on the native side. And so then you get the advantages of the web on deployment, and you get the advantages of native on the experience that you're able to deliver.
And so hybrid does work for some people, as it turns out. And Amazon is another great example where you probably haven't noticed, but Amazon's iOS client is a hybrid app. And we discovered this sort of by mistake. One time we got the app in a funky state and the controls were selected, much like happens in HTML. We realized these weren't native components at all. These were assembled components, presumably in a web view. And then you go back to Flipboard, which is an example of a native app. And I think you have a funny story about this, the Flipboard app, and how it's actually not as native as you might think.
Yeah, a lot of people were saying that Flipboard is the reason to go native. They ignored the web and went straight to native. And as we've been saying, they ignored the web delivery side for a long time. But the actual work that they're doing to get this content across, because it's very much kind of magazine-style content, all of that is actually done in the web itself. And there's bridging technology that allows you to drive the kind of experience side of the UI on native.
So there's also another angle to this. So it turns out you can get, in a limited way, some leverage out of hybrid, but not as much as I think a lot of us were hoping would be successful. Then there's the point that, with apps, the app icon on my phone looks like this, but on my wife's phone, it looks like that, right? If you spend a ton of time creating this incredibly optimized version of your application, but your users don't ever grab it, that's another really big problem. And there are some companies that have some innovative solutions here. Voodoo is a company that we actually work with. Walmart bought this a while ago. To solve this problem, they actually push experiences out to users using, Lua, right?
Lua,
and a custom rendering script. But going back to the web, Netflix has a great model here because they have tons and tons of devices. We talked about essentially 4 platforms: iOS, Android, Windows Phone, and BlackBerry in passing. These guys have hundreds of different devices they need to support. And so the idea of upgrading experiences doesn't make any sense to them. They have a web experience that they deliver through a WebKit that they embed on these platforms. And that actually is an interesting model and highlights an advantage that the web has over native. And that's an example of why we recently sponsored the Pixate project in Walmart Labs, because This is a project that lets you skin native Android or iOS with CSS, and you can actually serve that CSS up dynamically and change the skin, which sort of brings some of that advantage back to the app scene. But we're out of time, and so going back to the initial question, web or app? What is the answer, right? Like, can you use the web to replace app stacks and get total leverage there? We actually don't think so. Can you use the web to be the only delivery platform for your experiences and ignore the app landscape? We don't think that makes any sense either. But can you use the web to get some leverage with hybrid apps? I think you can. And we think the answer to that becomes yes in limited ways. And we hope that's help shine some light on the landscape and make some decisions here. It is a confusing time, and we hope that there's some resolution in the future on what makes sense. Thank you.